weight training has always had this weird dichotomy because most weight training with a barbell, the barbell is such a, it goes straight down to the center of the earth. It's relatively inefficient for loading the structures you're trying to train. So as a consequence, you got to put a disproportionate amount of weight on a barbell when you're doing a squat in order to transmit any meaningful load to the hip and thigh musculature. So it looks cool because you're putting these plates that are as big as manhole covers on the bar, and it's a lot of weight, but what's actually getting delivered is load to the targeted musculature because of the inefficiency of the mechanics is actually quite small. But with a properly designed piece of equipment, you can be using a lot less extrinsic weight, but the loading on the musculature is way, way better. If you don't believe that, just go lean up against the wall with your hips and knees at 90 degrees and do a wall sit for as long as you can. In the last 10 seconds of that, that'll be harder than any set of squats you ever did. You don't have to hit a particular muscle group from a lot of different angles. The key to hitting all the muscle group is the fatigue. Because you're going to get motor units in all corners of that musculature stimulated if you invoke enough fatigue, because then you will recruit all the motor units available throughout the entire architecture of the targeted muscle. Yeah, you can't mind control your way to that level of fatigue. You can mind control your way to that level of motor control in a muscle group, but you still need the resistance and the loading to be continuous in order to invoke the level of fatigue that you need to stimulate that. So when you're invoking that kind of fatigue, it requires a lot of conscious mental control, because what you're doing is, again, you're threatening your most preserved biologic function. You're training until you can't move the weight, you can't move. Movement is your most preserved biologic function. Without it, you can't eat. You can't get food, you can't keep from becoming food. So when that sort of fatigue gets invoked, we have all sorts of instincts that make us want to rebel against that. Set it down, give up, jab at the weight, try to invoke momentum, brace with your bones. But if we have an intellectual override of all those instincts to try to really go after the stimulus intrinsically, it's extremely uncomfortable. It invokes a lot of emotion, a lot of panic, and it goes against every instinct that we have. But in terms of making somatic awareness, it works better than anything, because all of that pain, all of that fatigue, and all of that panic activates the limbic system, which is the more primitive portion of your brain where your amygdala is. And there is one synapse between your amygdala and your prefrontal cortex. One synapse, which is why when you do anything, when you're learning any skill or you're doing anything, if you do it in an environment where there is stress and pain involved, it's learned much more quickly and ingrained much more permanently. They call it limbic learning. That's talked all day long about, in jiu-jitsu, you don't want to get arm barred, but once you get arm barred, because of the pain involved in the limbic learning, then you've really learned the lesson.